Hi, welcome to All Things Possible. We're excited to have you here, even if Phil's full of funny faces when we start.
There's a magpie above my head in the tree yakking away, and I was talking to it, so.
We love having you with us on All Things Possible. And if you haven't joined us yet, join us at www.allthingspossible.biz.
For fun and games and a lot of information.
And we're outside, so you're going to hear that magpie while we're talking, apparently.
His name is Maggie.
We are excited to have you here for part 3 of conflict resolution tactics. We are just excited to be able to share some different ideas, different ways to look at things, and we're gonna kick this one off with Bill.
And we are.
Yep, we are.
Okay, so there is a surprising behavior and an emotion that is underlying so many of our conflicts. And this one is mostly behind, you'll want to use this tactic or this tool when it isn't just a single issue conflict. Like, oh, this one thing happened. It's like this person is difficult to get along with. It's an ongoing series of problems with this person, and they all fit a similar pattern.
So could we call that identify what the driving behavior is?
We could.
We could, huh?
So,
like the title.
Just recently, I was doing a coaching session with one of my clients, one-on-one. And interestingly enough, in one session, the two things this client wanted to talk about and work on is conflicts. One is with a boss supervisor at work, and the other one was with a parent of the female persuasion. His mom. Okay, actually Dad was a part of that too. But let me just tell you a little bit about these stories, and then we'll get into what was the driving behavior underneath that. So I said, share with me just a little bit about what's going on with the boss at work. Well, this guy he never listens to our ideas. We give him these great ideas. He won't pass them up the line. And he worked in a tech room where you have a whole team of techs, and this guy was the lead for these computer technicians, coders type stuff. I'm not sure what all they do. I don't understand it much, but it had to do with keyboards.
But you could term it as technology.
Technology,
a technology team, right?
But this guy was just always shutting them down and criticizing their work and the ideas. Anytime they tried to do anything different, he was shutting them down. And he was saying, this has been a frustrating thing for me for the last 10 years that I've been working on this job. This guy, it's just always the same thing. I says, aha. And I asked him a question, but I'm not going to tell you what the question is yet. And
That's
then he started.
Teaser.
Later on, teasing, different tease. Anyway, can I do that? Is that okay?
No, you can cut that part out.
Oh, okay. So I asked him this question, and I'm going to share with you later what the question is. But then we went on to talk about his mother, and I would give her the title of helicopter mom of adult grown children. And he started sharing things that she just is like she's never allowed her, she just keeps those apron strings tied up tight to all of her children. A great example was telling me about one of the siblings that built a home on their property. He says, here, take this 5 acres and build a home, but yet they have never deeded the property to the child. It's like a way to keep control of the child. And that's just one example of many things that he told me that were frustrating in his relationship with his parents, and especially his mom. And I asked him a question. And now I'll tell you what the question is. And I asked it, of course I didn't make him wait. I asked him with each story. And then we decided what to do about it. I said, what is their fear point? What are they afraid of? And so let's go back to the
We're going to talk about the surprising underlying emotion that most conflict and difficulty comes from.
Yes.
And he kind of already told you what it was, but it's fear. The biggest thing that causes our conflicts and our difficulties is fear, and an underlying emotion of fear. Think about this upper management. So a senior management position that's over the technology group. He is older and wiser, right?
He's kind of my generation.
But
almost.
he's probably, right, like we're going to make an assumption here that because he is slower at the technology and not as up to date and maybe not as proficient as this younger team,
Well,
that there would be a fear there. What kind of fear do you think that they might have?
I asked him, what's the difference between this guy and you guys? And it was not an assumption. This guy didn't have the skills with the technology and the computers and things that they had, even though he was a pioneer in the field. A pioneer is an antique, right? And he was...
Can be.
And he was
You're more of an antique than I am.
I'm way antique-y. I've got the coloring to prove it. I'm fading. What was he afraid of? Okay, he was afraid that he was becoming irrelevant, and we talked about that. And I led several key questions to get him to say, yeah, he's afraid that he'll get passed over for promotion, that he might even lose his job if they realize that everyone on his team can do his job better than he can. I said, so how do you resolve that? You don't want to get this guy fired. What can you do? Validate, collaborate. Sit down with him and say, man, I so appreciate your leadership. Man, the things you have taught me, make that person feel secure because they're afraid that they're not good enough. So it's like, man, you were a pioneer here and you've taught me so much stuff. I love what you've taught me and showed me here. Bring that up in casual conversation. Don't bomb it all on them at once. They'll figure out what you're doing.
When you can acknowledge and the value that you have for that person and what they bring to the table, and that they feel acknowledged and valued, and that they belong as well,
right,
that is when we can start to remove the fear.
I'm so glad that you're here because we need your wisdom. You've got these years of experience that we just don't have, and we need you. And then that person's like, yes, I'm important. They look to me. Okay, stroke their ego a little bit, and I don't mean that lightly or facetiously, but help them feel validated. Just what Kris says.
Right, we're not trying to make them feel something that's not genuine.
Yeah,
and
don't be
disingenuous. We aren't asking you to say something that you don't believe, but find their qualities, find their attributes that can be built upon, and find what is relevant for them. Why is that? Those years of experience why is that bringing benefit to the situation, and buoy them up with what they are doing right. So much of the time we forget that people don't see things as they are. We see things as we are, from our experiences, our expertise, our challenges, our life lessons, our values, our belief system. So we don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. And that's for every single person. So if that's a person that is above you in a leadership position and you feel that they're intimidated by technology, start acknowledging, how could I show you or create a way for you to learn this better? Or what could I do to make this something that you understand better? Like,
speak to their fear.
Yeah.
Speak to their fear. Give them the validation to where they feel like they belong and they're validated. And you speak to that fear. And then when you say, hey, let's work together on this. I've got this idea. Help me develop it. You might have it already developed in your head, but make them think it's their idea too. Okay? And move it along.
It's not even make it think, but find the areas where maybe you aren't the expert and they have expertise to bring into it. You're not trying to make believe that they have value in this. Find the values that they can bring to the table.
Yeah. And say, this is kind of what I've been working on. What do you see that we can improve here and make it better? Give them a chance to contribute. And so he was just like, oh my gosh, this has been the problem the whole time. And we've been going about it wrong. It's just like this, we've been locking heads. And so
when you can come to commonalities where you validate their value in the project and your value in the project, you have a lot bigger chance of implementing that project into it taking a bigger precedence, if that makes sense. Yeah. If you want them to, if this is the person that's over you and you can get them to validate the project and get them to understand it and get them to add their piece of expertise, it will be more likely to be implemented.
And it can even be a coworker. You find out what they're afraid of and you speak to their fear. At least you can understand their behavior so much better than the common thing of that person's just a difficult person to get along with. It's like, well, they are difficult, but it's because of this and this and this, and you understand that. So let me tell you the rest of the story about the helicopter parents and especially the mom. So it took me a little more questions and digging to figure out I asked him what she was afraid of. He's like, I'm not sure. Well, tell me a few more things about, give me some of the ideas, the things that she does that irritate you. And he started telling me stories. He says, one thing she's always telling me, he says, I feel like I robbed you of your childhood. There was a special needs child in a large family. And he says, Mom's always telling me, I feel like you spent your whole life in the back seat of the car. I was like, okay, what is she afraid of? And there was a few stories like that. Can you identify what she might be afraid of now? That she failed each of these children as a mother, and because she's afraid she's a failure, she's trying to finish the job of being a good mom. Well, and that's why she's holding on to these kids so tight. And both parents, it's like we feel like we let them down, that we didn't do enough, that we ignored them to a great degree.
But out of fear, she's going to the guilt. Out of fear that I wasn't good enough, I wasn't a good enough parent, she's going to the guilt of like, oh, but there's all these reasons. So she has gone back into her own opinion, her experiences, her values, her behaviors, right? She's going back into her feelings of all of this, and it's because of fear. Fear that she's not going to be relatable to the children, fear that she's not going to have them in her life.
And her guilt causes her to overreact and hang on tight, which drives the family further apart. So obviously, you already know the solution. If you were in that situation, wow, Mom, you were the best mom. You showed me by example what it is to have absolute service and love to somebody in need. You lived your message, and I got it. Thank you, Mom. I appreciate what you did because I wouldn't want it any other way. You were a shining, it was great what you did. Different kinds of validation like that. Again, validate, make them feel like they belong, that they
acknowledge them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Acknowledge what they are doing and the value that they bring, because that will, faster than anything, that will bring them out of the fear, because they're going into a negative emotion when they're in fear, and so they're going to be picking up the negative things, the guilt, the shame, the I wish I would have, right? When you can bring them to the positive and you can bring them to a higher vibration emotion, and you can acknowledge the good things, then there's far more good things than bad.
Yeah.
And but it's where we live that we find those, right?
And the behavior stops. Once you're like, yes, I am validated, so I don't need to overcompensate by controlling my adult children's lives.
Most of the time when we react in fear, the person will react to us in their fear. And so that immediately creates this, butting heads or conflict or wanting distance and a pushback. So we build up a wall and we create that resistance away from that, because that's not something we want to feel. We don't want to feel the fear. And so we do build up resistance. And we try to stay away from that, right? So that immediately brings up more of that for that person. So the more we can diffuse it and we can get rid of that, right? The more we can identify what it really is, then we can start to do the diffusing. Then we can start, really dialing in on what's happening.
So the takeaway for this is,
why are they afraid?
What are they afraid of?
Like, go to that question. Why are they afraid? What is showing up? Because both of these same client, same person in the coaching session had two different things where this was showing up for them. And part of that was his.
Yes.
Because it was showing up with, he had these fears because of these fears that were being brought up. So why is the behavior happening? What do they fear?
And so then it isn't even going and talking to the person, we have this problem because, let's figure out how to fix the problem, understand what they're afraid of, speak to their fears, heal their fears, and the problem goes away.
Well, and how could I do it differently? Yeah. Right? If you're trying to identify what the driving behavior is and what's happening in this conflict. So for conflict resolution, if you will identify the fear that they have, that will help you to make a resolution for that. Because how could you do it differently? You can start building on the positives. You can take them out of that fear, give them more confidence and more value to then not have to react the way they're reacting.
That's it. That's
so,
simple.
Hope you liked step 3. So far we've gone through step 1 was diffuse, step 2 was accountability, and now we're identifying. We're going to identify that driving behavior, that emotion, and how we can do it differently, right? How we can help them to acknowledge it and do things differently.
And we invite you to join us for part 4.
Yes, part 4 is going to be on communication. We can't wait till we get to share that one with you. But before that, if you haven't joined us, you can join us at allthingspossible.biz. We love to have you in our community with All Things Possible, and we will see you there at the next one.